Gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Dodd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Katzenbach, nice to have you here with us today. I suppose that an awful lot of the speculation that grew out of the Warren Commission after its completion of its work over the past 15 years, a lot of it stemmed, and I'll ask if you agree or disagree with this, I guess, stemmed from the memorandum, the so-called memorandum from Mr. Moyers, the November 25th memorandum that you drafted and sent to Bill Moyers. As I recall, over the past 15 years, any number of occasions I've either read or heard people refer to that first paragraph in that memorandum points 3 points, and I'll quote it for you, and then I don't know if you have a copy or not. I'll see that you get one in front of you. I'm quoting it here. It says, "The public must be satisfied that Oswald was the assassin, that he did not have confederates who were still at large, and that the evidence was such that he would have been convicted at trial." This was November 25th, 1963, 3 days after the assassination. Now, unfortunately, they don't always quote the other paragraphs in that memorandum, which I think, to an extent, mellow that single paragraph. But still, that paragraph has been quoted extensively as an indication that the Warren Commission was really a self-fulfilling prophecy, that it was not designed to investigate the assassination of the president from a de novo position, but rather to confirm what the FBI had already concluded, what the Dallas police had concluded, and that therefore the Warren Commission didn't really fulfill its obligation, the obligation that Chief Justice Warren outlined when he said our responsibility is to get at the truth. I'm creating that sort of scenario for you because that's how I think it's been portrayed over the years. I've listened to you today talk about the various motivations, and it's hard even, one can only sympathize, not empathize, with your position in those days and what it must have been like to have been in the position you were in and have the responsibilities you had. Can you tell us on this committee, or help us try and straighten out in a statement, what was your motivation at that moment that you wrote those words? And this is 3 days after the assassination. The public must be satisfied that Oswald was the assassin. Why was it so important that the public be satisfied that Oswald was the assassin?
Because, very simply, if that was the conclusion that the FBI was going to come to, then the public had to be satisfied that that was the correct conclusion. My whole attitude in that memorandum, and I think it's contained or reflected in other paragraphs that you mentioned, I think it was reflected in other conversations, other memoranda that you have, one overwhelming feeling that I had, and that was that in the assassination of the President of the United States, all of the facts, all of the evidence, everything that was relevant to that had to be made public.
That's and it had to... You say that in the first... I should quote... in fact, Mr. Chairman, I would ask unanimous consent that this memorandum, if it's not already been admitted into evidence, be done so at this particular juncture.
I believe it's already... Is
it already in? Well, then fine. I think all of it should be there. You say that in the first paragraph. It is important that all of the facts surrounding President Kennedy's assassination be made public in a way which will satisfy people in the United States and abroad that all of the facts have been told, and that a statement to this effect be made now. I think that's fine, but I still am perplexed, absolutely perplexed, on why it was in the public interest to prove that Oswald was the one, and that there in the next sentence that he did not have confederates who were still at large. Why was it so important to prove that 3 days after the assassination?
Because, for the very simple reason, if that was not the fact, and all the facts were not on the table, then it seemed to me that nobody was going to be satisfied. And I thought that the public was entitled. If there was a conspiracy, then we ought to say there was a conspiracy. If there were Confederates at large, it ought to be said there were Confederates at large. But I knew then already that, Oswald had been to Russia. Oswald had been to Mexico. Now, if you're going to conclude, as the Bureau was concluding, that this was not part of a conspiracy, that there were not Confederates, then you had to make that case with all of the facts absolutely persuasive. If you didn't reveal these facts, somebody else was going to reveal them. Mm-hmm. Now, if there was a conspiracy, there was a conspiracy, and you put those facts out. But if you were persuaded that Oswald was a lone killer, you'd better put out all of the facts, and you better not cover up anything. And you better say now, all of the facts are going to be made public. At least that was the advice that I was giving Moyers, and that was the advice I was giving the president, and that was the motivation for the Warren Commission. I don't think this is artistically phrased. Perhaps you've never written anything that you'd like to write better afterwards, Congressman, but I have.
You wouldn't get me to say that.
But I think if you take the other paragraphs of it, take other things that I was quoted as saying, other things that I said, that there is a consistent view on my part.
Well, I didn't want to pull this out of... My idea was not to pull it out of context. That's why I want to make sure it's all in there. In fairness to you, it ought to be all in there.
I was very conscious of those facts which were going to be seized upon. You know, is this a Russian conspiracy? I was very conscious, perhaps as a little bit of a history buff, that nobody ever put to bed satisfactorily the assassination of Abraham Lincoln.
Well, you seemed in the next paragraph, and I quote you again here, you say, unfortunately, the facts on Oswald seem about too pat, too obvious, parentheses, Marxist, Cuba, Russian wife, etc. The Dallas police have put out statements on the communist conspiracy theory, and it was they who were in charge when he was shot and thus silenced. Am I off base in there in detecting a feeling that you had on November 25th, 1963, that there was something more to this, that you felt, in fact, whether intuitively or based on other information, that this guy had been set up, that Oswald was not alone? I sense in that paragraph, reading it word for word and carefully, that you had some thoughts running through your mind, and you were expressing them to Bill Moyers in those words.
I don't think I had a view one way or the other than what I was being told the FBI investigation had, but I was saying, you've got a lot of facts here. If you say Oswald was the lone killer, and he wasn't in conspiracy with anyone, had nothing to do with any foreign government, you've got a lot of awkward facts that you're going to have to explain, and you better explain them satisfactorily. In other words, you better put it all out on the table.
May I have one more minute, Mr. Chairman, and I'll terminate.
Without objection.
On page 10 of your deposition, I'm going to back you to it myself. Oh, I'm sorry, page 22. I apologize. You make, when asked by Mr. Cornwell, I won't read the question to you, but basically he's talking to you about the assassination plots, asking, Mr. Cornwell during the deposition was asking about the assassination plots. And your response is this: no, in fact, I never believed there were such plots. I testified to this before, but I remember at one time they were in the White House at the time of the Dominican upheaval. And I remember Lyndon Johnson asking a direct question to Dick Helms about assassination and got a flat denial from Mr. Helms that the CIA had anybody involved. It was a short conversation, and you can qualify it any way you want to, but I went home pretty confident. Did you prepare any memorandum at that time after that conversation? Or do you remember that conversation so clearly that you have no doubt in your own mind that Dick Helms told the President of the United States in 1965 that there were no assassination plots?
I remember the conversation. It's hard to remember verbatim, word for word. The question may well have been, have we ever been involved in any assassination of anybody? And the answer to that may have been the flat no. I don't know. I don't remember exactly how the question was phrased, but and it obviously had to do at that time with Vietnam, and I was satisfied from that we didn't engage in that kind of activity in this country, and I suppose I was satisfied in part, Congressman, because it was so incredible to me that we should have.
But you didn't take any notes or...
I almost never did. I never had time to.
Thank you, Mr. Katzenbach. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Time of the gentleman has expired.